So today's conversation is with Michael Counts. Michael is the founder of Empath AI and A-Plan Coaching. So Michael, welcome to the podcast. Can you please introduce yourself and tell us a bit more about your companies?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's great to be with you. I mean, I've really been looking forward to this and excited to have this conversation. So, a little background. I live in Brooklyn, New York. For the first part of my career, I would say, initially an artist in the performance space. I was a visual artist initially, and then I started doing more performance art and large scale installation and then event design. And then people started to call it immersive theater. And then I did some operas and large scale fashion shows, but was a designer director and did projects around the world, mostly in New York. About 10 years ago, I started working with a coach. I'd been introduced to coaching before, but I really leaned into the coaching piece. And as a creative person and as an entrepreneur, coaching was transformative for me, like really helped me align all the aspects of my life as a husband, as a parent, as a son, as a brother, as a community member, as a colleague, as a manager, as a director, as a designer, in all the different ways in my life. And because the fundamental questions of the brand of coaching that I was introduced to at the time is like, what do you want? And then how do you make a plan to go after that desire and those desires? And the approach is very broadly focused. What do you want in all domains of your life? What do you want for now, soon, and long term? What do you want your legacy to be when you're gone? Like just really asking questions about what do you want? And it was transformative for me and so unlocked for me so much potential in how I was living my life and what I was doing professionally that I thought, like, why doesn't everybody have a coach? And in truth, a lot of the creative work that I was doing was art in service of helping people rediscover wonder in their lives. And I think that is a service that a lot of art does and can do very well. But it is about, in its own way, facilitating a transformation for people and insight and elevating people's consciousness about the world that they live in, the ways that they're being, et cetera. And and so 10 years ago, over the course of about a year, I formulated a plan to really reconsider coaching as an industry and as a practice, not initially as an industry, but as a practice. And I worked with my coach. Her name is Sarah Ellis Conant, and she had grown up around coaching. Her father was one of the founders of the coaching movement in America. She had also eventually coached and then got an MBA from Stanford University and then was at Deloitte Consulting in their human capital practice, and then was coaching very high level leaders for organizations when I found her as my coach. And so I said, you're a perfect partner to take your model and scale it and make coaching more widely accessible. So we started A-Plan about 8 years ago. And that company is now about 100 coaches. We coach internationally. We have many very large scale blue chip clients that we serve. We work with the Obama Foundation, President Obama's post-presidency foundation, where he affects change around the world. He operates on 4 continents, and we coach all of the leadership fellows in that program globally, and tons of other organizations and companies and startups and VCs and big companies, tech companies and legacy companies. I'll finish my sort of background explanation to say that part of that endeavor was, how do you make coaching more engaging? How do you make it more efficient? How do you make it better for coaches? How do you make it better for clients? And one of the obvious ways 8 years ago was adding tech, right? Adding an app component that could optimize the back end, make the front end more engaging, facilitate communication between coach and client, so that it wasn't just that kind of legacy model where you meet with a coach once a week, once every 2 weeks for a limited period of time. They work with you on a specific thing in your life, leadership. Oftentimes coaching at that time was used for management, training, leadership development, things like that. And I thought this can be much more broadly applied. So we worked really hard to apply tech and make it more accessible by lowering the price point. And we got it down to the minimum subscription for a plan is about $500 a month for an individual to receive weekly 30-minute sessions of coaching, and then to have unlimited access to their coach through the app and other tools and resources that were in the app. That was reducing the price of really high quality, high caliber coaching a lot, but it was still inaccessible for most people. So that's like in the US, that's like more than a car payment for most people. That's like a big expense in their life. And so I thought, okay, great. Like we've done a lot. We changed the industry as a lot of other companies were coming up at the same time, like Better Up and Torch and other companies. But it was still inaccessible for most people. So when the AI wave hit the world a couple of years ago in late 2022, this is the unlock. This is the moment that coaching is going to truly be transformed. And I think a lot of other people started to see that soon after. We quickly started a little skunkworks at 8plan and then spun that off as a separate company now called Empath AI. And the purpose of Empath is to take all those great coaches that we have and create AI extensions of them, whereby somebody could have access, in effect, to that coach through an interface that is AI driven, where they can text and have voice interactions with the coach that is effectively an extension of the coach that is informed by that coach's knowledge and experience and personal history and how they would coach. AI is very good at decoding language and then reproducing it, right? And that's what coaching is transmitted through conversation and language. And so AI can ask, if I'm a coach, what would Michael say in this instance? But basically, the idea was, how could AI reproduce what a coach like me would say in any instance? And we built a system by which to do that. And by including the coaches in the process, we have them as a partner to continue to fine tune the AI, because we want to do a model where the coach is still very involved, where it's not now I have an AI coach. Rather, I have a human coach that I have unlimited access to because I interact with their AI extension a lot of the time. Not all the time, but a lot of the time. And what we found so far is that's been transformative for people. You can drop the price by about 95%, make it very affordable, kind of like a Headspace app level affordable, but give people a tremendous amount of value. In some ways, we have clients who have done both and said, I prefer the AI extension because I have access to it anytime. I can talk to my coach on a walk in the morning. I can talk to my coach at 2 a.m. if I wake up and my mind is racing. And I think that, and maybe a final point, is that we're moving into a time of profound disruption in the workforce globally, right? McKinsey predicts that as many as 800 million people could face job loss in the next 5 years alone due to AI and automation. That's going to be a huge disruption. And if this world of abundance that is promised as a result of GI and things like that, people's sense of purpose is going to change profoundly, right? So many of us in the world today define ourselves through our jobs and our occupation. And as that changes, and people don't need to work nearly as much, or if at all, to support themselves, which is, I think, what a lot of people think is coming in this world of abundance, then how do people define themselves? What is their purpose? And I think that change is actually going to be really facilitated by coaching, because coaching helps people create purpose, find purpose in their life. It helps people think about where they want to go, what they want to do, who they want to be it with, and set goals. And I think, and find inner purpose, which is very different than therapy, but it is very much at its core of how coaching is different. It's very forward facing. And I think that the world we're heading into, coaching is going to be a key pillar of that world.
And so, do you think like AI platforms can completely replace a coach? If you come back like 10 years before when you hired your coach, do you think it will have the same impact on you if you had an AI instead of your like real coach?
Not instead of. No, I actually believe quite firmly that AI cannot and will not replace the human coach. That's our distinction. Empath is taking a very different approach than a lot of other companies that are trying to build a pure AI coaching chatbot. Lots of people are honestly now talking to ChatGPT like it's a coach or a therapist. And there are these prompts going around where, like, how do you train ChatGPT to be your coach or be your therapist? And I think that there's a novelty to that. And I use ChatGPT every day and find it very helpful and useful. But what ChatGPT in its most powerful form will never be able to do is replace a human being. And the true empathy that you feel, the true connection that you feel with someone who has had a shared lived experience, it can simulate empathy, but it can't actually have true empathy because it hasn't lived. ChatGPT's never been fired broken up with, struggled, felt fear, all those things that make us human. And so our approach is human centric, right? It's like there's still a human coach that you have. We're just making it hyper efficient by extending them through AI. And we're building a whole operating model where you still have access to your coach. You can still meet your coach in person, but you have this unlimited access to them through their AI. I think if I'd had that 10 years ago, actually, the ways that I used coaching 10 years ago was starting to experiment with ways that the coach could be in my life more in the day to day, hour to hour, and not just once a week. So I would schedule moments. I'd ask my coach to text me, follow up. I'd say, I have a big meeting on Thursday. Will you text me on Thursday morning and just give me a little encouragement? And those little things just helped remind me that she was there. The accountability. I think that part of what a coach does is they hold all of your intentions that combine into sort of your vision of your best self, who you most want to be in the world. And then when you forget, I just show it to you. I'm like, oh, Romain, but don't forget about this. And you're like, oh yeah, right. That's who I want to be. And that's a powerful thing. And in some ways, what coaches that I know often describe coaching as is like, they help reflect back the good, the best, the powerful, the things that you want, and let all the fear and all that other stuff pass by. So that ability to reflect back your best intentions helps you be your best self. So what my coach was doing for me 10 years ago, when I would say, hey, text me, that was just like a little reminder and plugging me back into her and that version of myself that she was holding for me. And all I needed to receive was a text to remind me of, oh yeah, she's there and she's holding that vision of me. So I was reminded of that vision of me. I'd go into the meeting stronger and more effective. The AI does that really well. Like when we were developing our prototype, like I would talk to it all the time in a challenging moment, in a difficult moment, a moment of fear, or a moment of celebration. I would just take it out and share what was going on. I just speak into it and then it'd give me feedback and be like, oh, Michael, I know that you have that goal for the kind of dad you want to be. And I just shared something really about like a big win for me as a dad. And it would say, yeah, I know that's your goal. Like, way to go. High five. Keep going. How could you do that again next weekend? And it would just help me think through those things. And that was just the AI version of my coach, but it was plenty by virtue of it being available to me anytime, anywhere, late at night, early in the morning, whenever, as much as I needed it, was transformative. Because so much of coaching, if you think about it, if you've ever worked with a coach or a therapist, like they're quiet most of the time. Like they're there to ask a question and then let you riff and talk. And I think that it's in the talking that you discover how you think and feel and what you want. I know that, again, a well-placed question from a coach or a therapist allows me to say out loud what I want and what I'm afraid of. And I learn about myself in the process of speaking it. There's a saying, a goal well defined is a goal half achieved. You write down a goal on a piece of paper and throw it away. You've increased the odds of succeeding at that goal by 40% just by writing it down. Why? What you've done in bringing that level of consciousness to a goal, writing it down, having to articulate it in words and write it on a piece of paper, you've organized it in your mind in a different way than it was just free floating as some vague desire, right? I don't just want to travel a lot. I go to Paris this summer. You know what I mean? Those are two totally different things that kind of overlap, but one is specific and one is general. And when you put a general idea, goal, or desire into a specific intention, it becomes much more likely that you're going to achieve it. That's what coaching does. And so the AI renders that really effectively for people, because if it's about listening and asking a well-placed question, the more it gets to know you, the AI can do that really effectively. And I think finally that people listen to an AI more deeply than they do to ChatGPT when they feel that AI really truly knows them and is backed up by a person that they feel an actual level of accountability to. I don't feel accountability to ChatGPT. I feel accountability to my coach, even if I only talk to her once a month in a group setting. But it's a person, and I think that changes it. So that's the model. That's what we're trying to do in both companies. But AI is such a powerful tool to extend knowledge work that it would be silly to not be pursuing this aggressively, because in truth, the world needs it, man. People need support. we are facing in the US, I think this is also largely true globally, is we're in an epidemic of loneliness. Social media, the promise of social media was to connect us and unify us, and it's actually divided us and split us and made people feel much more alone. And I think that coaching helps with that. I think people feel they're struggling, people feel overwhelmed by the pace of change in the world. And I think that coaching really helps people resolve that and manage those feelings and then get unstuck. Because when you're overwhelmed or fearful, you're stuck in your amygdala. That's the fight or flight stance. It's like we're dealing with a threat, and it turns off a lot of our higher level thinking. And on a neurobiological level, like when you're stuck in your amygdala, it's much harder to connect. It's much harder to create. It's much harder to think. It's much harder to feel serene and feel all the good things that we feel and create in our lives. So I think that helping people move from their amygdala into their prefrontal cortex is part of what coaching does very well. And if you don't do that, you're stuck in your amygdala. And I think a lot of people feel overwhelmed. They get stuck in their amygdala. If I had to say what's the common denominator for most people on the planet today, I would say they're struggling from overwhelm and the sense of threat. And then they're stuck in their amygdala. As a civilization, in a way, we're stuck in our amygdala.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I think a lot of people are more often going to see a therapist rather than a coach. How do you distinguish someone who needs a therapist and someone who needs a coach instead?
Sure. I think there are similarities, but there are so many fundamental differences. Let me give you a little background. I grew up in a mental health household. My father was a psychiatrist, but he spent his life more on the talk therapy side of psychiatry than on the pharmaceutical side of psychiatry. My primary parent, my stepmother, who raised me, was a clinical social worker and had a practice. My brother is a psychotherapist. Like I know from this world, and I've spent a lot of years in therapy myself growing up in New York City, where that was pretty common, and mental health is a pretty common thing and resource. So I know very deeply from therapy. And what therapy tends to focus on is the past and the problem, the trauma, the challenges, the pain, what happened to you when you were a kid that has resulted in this behavior, this habit, this neuroses, whatever. And that's useful, but only up to a point. And I think a lot of people get stuck in that. I actually think a lot of people who are seeking out a therapist don't actually want or need a therapist. The technical definition of psychotherapy is the treatment of mental disorders. I think a lot of people don't have a mental disorder. They're just stuck, or they're struggling, or they're overwhelmed, or they're sad, or someone broke up with them and it's made them feel insecure. It's not a mental disorder. They need help. They need support. They need accountability. They need someone like a personal trainer would to help say, okay, we're going to get you stronger. Where do you want to go? What do you want to look like? Just like a trainer would say, oh, what are your goals? You want to lose 10 pounds and build muscle mass and be able to run a marathon? Cool, let's do that. As opposed to, why are you overweight? Let's sit here and talk for hours about why you're overweight. Okay, that's fine. That's useful up to a point, as I said. But what's much more useful for that person is to say, what do you want? You want to get trim? You want to run a marathon? You want to get fit? You want to look good in a bathing suit? Okay, let's do that. Coaching is similar in that way, that is saying, okay, coaching does look back. It looks at your history, but only as a reference point. And then it says, where do you want to go? Again, I said this at the beginning. The fundamental question of coaching is, what do you want? Like, what do you really, truly want? Like deep within yourself. Romain, what is your sense of purpose? What lights you up? What feels so natural to you that it doesn't feel like work? Right? What would you do with money? If you didn't need to make money, won the lottery, what would you do with your time that just feels fun and is a great use of your sense of purpose? And what do you want to contribute to others? And where do you want to go in the world? And who do you want to be there with? And do you want to have a family? And how big a family? And what do you want to do with that family? And what kind of relationship you want to have? And what kind of impact you want to have in your community? All those questions. How do you want to feel every day? What do you want your physical wellness to be, your financial wellness, all those things? What do you want? And then it says, okay, that's what you want. And let's make a plan to get you there. What are you going to start doing every day if those are your goals? How are you going to move towards them step by step, incrementally? And then a coach supports you as you go, because we all forget, right? We all say, oh, I have this goal, but it's getting hard. So oftentimes I say that, like, when we get stuck, it's our fear masquerading as our best thinking, showing up and saying, that goal you said you wanted, that's a bad idea. Let's just not do that. Let's give up. And we give up,
Mm.
and because it gets scary and it gets hard. But coach is there to remind you, to be a counterpoint to that voice that says, forget it, let's give up, rooted in fear. It says, no, you can do it, dude. You're making progress. Let's keep going. And it encourages you. So that's what a coach does. And so if you were to say, what are the highest level fundamental differences between coaching and therapy? I would say therapy looks back and at the problem, and coaching looks forward and at the solution. What do you want? And I've done both. And sometimes I've done both simultaneously. Currently, I'm doing both simultaneously. But coaching to me is so much more empowering and useful especially for people who just feel overwhelmed, because that's a problem that you can get stuck in and repeat again and again, the problem. Or you can say, what can I do that counteracts that problem? What can I do that will bring about the life that I want? If this isn't what I want, if I feel right now like this isn't the life that I want, okay, fine. I don't want to spend hours and hours talking about what got you here. I want to spend time saying, where do you want to go from here? And then support you as we do that. And I think that's fundamentally the difference. And I think that what we find is that coaching as an industry and as a resource, it just hasn't been as widely understood or accepted as therapy. Therapy's been around a lot longer, has longer history and tradition. And coaching was really developed out of the personal potential movement in the 70s and 80s by people like my partner, Sarah's dad, Dave Ellis. I mean, he's one of the earliest pioneers of coaching, wrote some of the first books about coaching. And this is reasonably new. And I think people still say, I know what a therapist is, and insurance covers therapy in a lot of instances, but coaching is a little different. And how does that work? And what I feel like I'm trying to do, and many others are trying to do, is make it much more mainstream, democratize access to coaching so that people understand that oftentimes what they really want is a partner to help them create the life they want, as opposed to stay in conversation about what they don't want. So anyway, long answer, but that's what it is. And I feel like that's our movement. That's what we're trying to do. That's certainly my purpose in the world.
And now a lot of people are reading books, a lot of self-help books, and listening to podcasts and spending hours like watching videos and all kinds of content, but they're not changing. Like, what do you think is that? Do you think they're lacking accountability? What's missing? Because they can spend years like that.
Yeah, I think that you really hit the nail on the head. I think it's accountability. I think that it's hard to change alone. I think that it's much easier to change in partnership. I think that things like some of the 12-step programs that exist in the world, AA, things like that, that help people change from a very specific and acute problem like alcoholism or drug addiction or really any form of addiction. Like, I personally believe that we're all addicts in one way or another. People get addicted to phones or food or alcohol or drugs or certain behaviors or money or prestige or sex. Like, all of these things become addictions. And one of the pillars of the programs that help people make those changes are community, are support, of accountability. In any of those programs, you have other people that you're going through it with. One of the most powerful tools of those programs is identification. If I hear someone else share in a meeting and I'm like, oh my God, I feel like that. I thought I was the only one who felt like that. So that's identification, connection with another. Then in those programs, you get a sponsor, someone to help you, someone to guide your path. That's a little bit like a coach for people that aren't in a 12-step program to help guide them. And I think that those resources, and I listen to a lot of those same podcasts too, and I'm a big believer, but what I do is then I try and implement those and I bring those intentions that I've gained to my conversation with my coach, and I set goals. And then I have my coach as an accountability partner. And this is, again, the beauty of our AI platform is that it then follows up. And it's like, hey, I want to create a habit of being more grateful. I want to shift my mindset, right? So then if I set that as a goal, my AI coach will check in with me. It'll ask me if I want this, but if I say yes, check in with me. It'll text me every morning and say, hey, Michael, what are 5 things you're grateful for today? You know, the next day it's in the late afternoon, the following day it's in midday, and then it's in the end of the day. But it's like mixing up the behavior, but just like a friend would, to say, hey, if I want to help you, Romain, develop a habit of gratitude, I'm going to text you every day. You say, hey man, what are you grateful for today? And we're going to be in conversation about that. Like that practice, by having the implementation of it and setting a structure around it, and then having the accountability partners follow up with you, you're way more likely to adopt that habit. And if you do adopt that habit, in 3 weeks, you can rewire your brain to look at the world very differently as a result of tracking gratitude. And this has been proven. There's a guy named Rick Hansen at UC Berkeley who's done a tremendous amount of work, a book called Hardwiring Happiness. We've leveraged a lot of his insights and research into the development of plans, methodology, and empaths methodology that is about creating new neural structures and new neural pathways around specific habits and behaviors that can change the way you look at everything and then change the way you see the world. And honestly, like a lot of these ideas are out there, but people don't implement them because they don't have the accountability partner. They don't have the commitment to follow through. And that's one of the things that I think is most valuable about coaching, is that it really helps you set the desire, set the intention, create a plan. How are we going to get there? And then it supports you as you go. And without those, a lot of people set the intention, God, I want to do that. Okay, cool. But like, how? What are you going to do every day? How are you going to break that big goal down into tiny actionable steps? And then how are you going to persist and not give up? That's where most people fail. They give up, or they don't set the goal into tiny intentions that they can achieve. I think one of our approaches is to break big goals down into tiny actionable steps that are so tiny, they're like almost effortless, that it doesn't even feel like a step, but it is. And then you take the step and you get a high five. It's like, way to go. You did it. You took that step, and then you feel good. And you're like, okay, I'm going to take the next step. And then all of a sudden you're going. Like you could walk 1,000 miles a step at a time and absolutely be 100% certain that you're going to get there. But that's the kind of thing where any goal is achievable in my mind, as long as you break it down into small steps and start doing it and don't give up. Like it's really as simple as that. But I think most people don't do those 3 simple steps. And again, that's where coaching is simple, but it's incredibly powerful.
And is there any like client success story that really stayed with you, like one that you remember often because it was just like a big change?
Yeah. In fact, many, but I know of one in particular where the person was stuck and thought that their marriage was ending, and that would have been the destruction of their family. They had kids, and they felt like they were just stuck in their career, and they just didn't feel like they were moving forward. And very quickly in coaching, that question, what do you want? I want to have a healthy, loving marriage. Okay. What are you going to do that? What actions are you going to take? Like you can't control the other person. What are you going to do to bring about that end? And they set goals and set some steps, and they started doing that. And then it was like, what are you going to do in your career? Okay. You're not loving this thing that you're doing. What would you like to do? Oh, always wanted to do that. Okay. How could you move to that in a way that's doesn't put you at financial risk? So keep doing your job that you don't like, but find an exit ramp to do the other thing. Started doing that, took some steps. Honestly, within a few months, their life was like transformed. Like the marriage got better. The career slowly changed. Their health got better. They started feeling better about themselves. So they stopped doing habits that weren't serving them, started exercising a little more, not by like even setting that goal, just by virtue of living a more vibrant life. And I would say within 3 months, like things had changed dramatically. Within 6 months, it was a different person. And no part of it was like painful. What's hard is being in a life that felt terrible, and where they felt stuck, and where they felt hopeless. And I think that's where a lot of people get when they feel overwhelmed, and helping them figure out where they want. That's the easier, softer way. That's the path to a life that just feels fun. And there are tools, as I said, with gratitude. In that instance that I was talking about, one of the things that person was encouraged to do was to write down little accomplishments that they were doing every day, and little wins, little things that they were grateful for. And they started talking about writing things like, I'm grateful for that moment with my wife, or I'm grateful for that talk with my kid, or I'm grateful for just living in a beautiful home and having friends. And if you think about it, like what happens is most of us, because of the way that our brains are pre-wired, right? Like we're descended from the most threat biased members of our tribe 50,000 years ago, right? Like the ones who were most like scanning the world for all the bad things that were coming at them, they survived because they were the most oriented towards the threats. That has persisted up until today for us. We're the descendants of them. That's the way our neural pathways were established. We retain a negative input much more quickly than we do a positive input. And as a result, a lot of us spend our time walking through our days thinking about looking for what's wrong, looking for what we don't like, looking for what we did wrong, looking for what others did wrong, looking for how the world is wrong.
Mm.
And that becomes our world, right? The world is what you choose to see. And when you develop a habit, I encourage you or anyone listening to this to try this. Start writing down 5 or 10 things a day that you're grateful for. Just make a little Apple memo on your phone and just jot down things that you're grateful for. A fun moment, ice cream sundae, dinner with friends, a pretty walk, the way the light came through a window, the taste of coffee in the morning, whatever it is, big things, little things, important things, insignificant things. And what you do when you're doing that is you're training your brain to start looking for the things that you want to put on your list. And then you're looking for things that I'm grateful for. You're looking for the wins. You're looking for the celebrations. And if you do that long enough, and literally in my experience, it's been a few weeks, all of a sudden you've created a new habit, which is I'm looking for the things that are awesome. I'm looking for the things I can put on my list. I'm looking for the win. I'm looking for the celebration. I'm looking for the thing that I'm grateful for. And as a result of that, you just start viewing the world that way and you start seeing more readily the things that are positive than negative. And that little shift alone can really honestly change mindset. And if you consider that like we are what we choose to see, if your world is what you choose to see in the world, then your world can be negative or positive. And I think that there's a lot of evidence to support this, but I think that is one of the most powerful levers. And so that instance of that person that you asked, what was a case study or an example of someone really being transformed? I think if you would ask that person 6 months later, hey, how different is your life today than it was 6 months ago? They would say completely different. Like I thought everything sucked 6 months ago. And now I feel like I'm living this incredible life and I'm so grateful and it only gets better. Like that, I've seen that again and again and again with people from I know, people in my life, people I don't know, testimonials from clients that they plan to serve. And we've served thousands of people. I personally coach a few people who I think would also say that they went from a life that was like a little dull, a little gray, a little bit sad, a little bit stuck to something where they're like seeing how fortunate they are. And that's a really powerful thing. And again, it's not hard, but it is powerful and it does take commitment, but it doesn't take grueling work. And I think that what I realized a few years ago is that I want to live in a world where more and more people are being their best. And I think a lot of people in the world today, and I think a lot of the problems we have as a society and as a civilization on the broadest scale are rooted in people's fear, people's ignorance, people's resistance, people viewing that negative bias, that negative view of the world, and then just projecting that on everything they see. And then that defines their actions. And when you feel like everything's a threat, you act defensively. And sometimes you act offensively to protect yourself. And I think a lot of that is unnecessary. And I think that's certainly my mission. And I think it's a growing mission amongst lots of people. We work with, as I said before, hundreds of coaches. And I think all of them would say that their purpose in the world is to help people move from that stuck place to that place of kind of unbridled potential.
And you mentioned exercising, like when someone comes to you with the problem, whatever the problem, and they're not doing any sport, they're not exercising, how often do you recommend them to start doing something, some kind of sport?
Pretty much always. I think that moving your body, getting out of your house, being in sunlight, right? There are so many things that we all know are better for us. And it has to do with mind-body connection. It has to do with endorphins and neural and dopamine and things that really so much of what's happening, really our perception of everything is happening right here in our mind, everything. The joy, the elation, the pain, the sorrow, all of it happens right here. And that's impacted by how our physical systems are working. And so I often encourage people to start developing it doesn't need to be like heavy. It's not go get in the best shape of your life unless you want to, but it's take a walk. I walk every
Mhm.
day and I ride my bike a lot and I get out in the sun and I walk in the park and I walk with my kids and go surfing and I go to the beach. And I think that activity is critical. And I think activity also engages you with other people in the world. And I think oftentimes people treat upset with isolation and they retreat. They feel scared and they retreat. They feel threatened, they retreat. And I think that they retreat in many ways. They retreat physically, they hide, they retreat in their mind, they distract. And I think that there are lots of ways to counteract that. I think for every negative habit, there's a positive counterpoint. And I think that doing things like exercise, doing things like engaging with other people, doing things like being of service to other people. There's so much wisdom about and so much written about this, but you want to pursue happiness for yourself, help others. Help others achieve happiness. I referred earlier to 12-step programs. And one of the principal ways that people recover from an addiction of any form is by helping others recover from the addiction. They serve others. And that act of service helps, I don't know, elevate their sense of themselves, their consciousness, their value. I think we feel good about ourselves when we're helping others. And so I would say exercise, service, engagement, being outside, being active, learning. And there's so many ways to be healthy. But I think when people feel alone, again, they retreat and they stop doing those things. And I think that's what happens when people get stuck. To be stuck is, I think, to stop doing the things that would be helpful and effective. And it happens to a lot of us, especially when we live in an overwhelming world. The world is objectively overwhelming today. The pace of change, the pace of disruption, the pace of conflict, the scale of conflict, the risks to our society, to our civilization are profound and unprecedented in many ways. And I think that can be exciting, but it's so easily terrifying. And I think a lot of people feel overwhelmed. Again, I said it earlier. There's a stat that I find always shocking. 62% of adults report feeling overwhelmed on a daily basis. That's a lot of people out of the time. And I think if you were to up the scale, say not every day, but like how many people feel overwhelmed 5 times a week? So not quite every day, but 5 times a week, it all of a sudden goes up to like 95%. And I feel like that's just the world we live in today. So how do you counteract that? Many of the things that we've already been talking about.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing all of that. It was very interesting. We spent more time into personal development stuff instead of business, but I think it was even more interesting.
The business piece, I think, takes care of itself when you have a really compelling offer and you have a compelling problem you're solving and you have a compelling solution for that problem. So I think that what we've found is there are ways that we can improve it always, but we've continued to grow and succeed as a business because it makes a lot of sense. People see when I say, hey, people feel overwhelmed today, like, they sure do. I sure do. Like they identify and, hey, would this solution work for you? Oh yeah, that would. Oh wait, and it's not $500 a month, but it's $10 a month. Okay. That's again, like these things, you have to do them well and right. Building a company is hard, but like any goal, it's a series of steps and actions and persistence.
Awesome. Where can people find you? Like I'll put the link of Empath. Where are you active?
We're on Instagram. We do more and more on TikTok these days. And I'm trying to really share some of these insights is why I was so eager to talk with you. I know you're just getting your podcast going, but in places where there's an opportunity to share what we're doing and why we're doing it, be of service. And that's how I consider this, as being of service. Hopefully sharing something that somebody heard and was like, oh, I'm going to try that gratitude thing and change their life. That's what I'm trying to do. So yeah, all the social media platforms and A Plan is at A-Plan Coaching.
Mhm.
And Empath is Empath. And check us out. You can actually do a free trial of Empath. And there are lots of services that A Plan has that are much more human centric and
Mhm.
traditional coaching, but still expensive, but super worth it. Like even at $500 a month, I think it's the best $500 one could spend on anything in their life because it unlocks potential for everything else. We do individual coaching, we do group coaching for companies, we do individual coaching for companies. And yeah, I think it's a great investment. It's the most pure way, I think, to invest in yourself is to get a coach.
Awesome. Thank you for your time, Michael.
Yeah, Romain, it was pleasure. Pleasure anytime.